to do, and like a small, ridiculous child who just fell in order, I don't think any of that was an accident. But what I can tell you is that we will not be an accident.
I think there's a growing recognition in this country, not just with Democrats, independents, but also Republicans, that de facto the Trump presidency ends in November of next year if the American people are given a fair chance and a voice and a choice. We will take back Congress. The President of the United States recognizes that, so he wants to rig the game, wants to change the rules.
So we've been covering this chronicle pretty extensively, and I encourage you to go watch all of our past videos about it. But ladies and gentlemen, we have yet even more updates to bring you here on the current redistricting effort happening in Texas, which will obviously have a massive impact on the 2026 midterms, and Gavin Newsom's utter meltdown about it, because he continues to lose his mind about this even more and more. The general trend here I'm observing is that as the news gets better for Republicans, Gavin Newsom goes even crazier, and it's kind of a hilarious chronicle to watch because, as I've so often cited, despite all of his empty threats, his fear-mongering about this, the truth is, number one, California and many other Democrat states are already heavily gerrymandered, right? This is not an issue of Republicans rigging the 2026 midterms. This is an issue of us balancing these scales, firstly, but even secondly, when you look internally at his legislative and political ability to actually change the California congressional map before 2026, the odds there really do not look all that great. He's simply pushing here pretty baseless and empty threats, but it's pretty hilarious to watch him try to act like a tough guy. So that's on one hand, but we also got to bring you an update here out of the Supreme Court when it comes to redistricting, because they essentially right now are considering taking on a case that will examine the constitutionality of the original Voting Rights Act statute that requires race-based congressional districting. And to make a very long story short, this is something that gives Democrats a built-in advantage of potentially, when you look at it, dozens of seats across the nation in deep Republican states. And that all here, guys, might be about to change, which would make the situation for Democrats even worse going into 2026, right? You already have Texas redistricting. Other Republican states are considering it. But if you can get rid of this very outdated, very incorrectly applied, inconsistently applied standard, that, of course, would rapidly expose how little Democrats can truly win elections without playing around with gerrymandering. It's almost as if they project everything they do onto us. So we'll get into it. First, though, folks, as usual, before we get into this news, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below and subscribe to the channel if you are new. Subscribing here, guys, is not only the best way to support our videos, but it also ensures that you can stay up to date with all of the latest news and coverage. And let's, of course, start out of Texas, and then we will talk about some of the Supreme Court situation. But as of early this afternoon, apparently, the Texas House Redistricting Committee has officially passed the new map we've been talking about. And this, of course, is something that will add about 5 Republican seats to the Texas congressional delegation. Before, you had 25 Republicans to 13 Democrats. Now you have 30 Republicans to 8 Democrats. And again, guys, this is largely being done because Republicans are deleting a lot of the ridiculous gerrymandered race-based congressional districts that we'll talk about here in a second. And this is what the Supreme Court is currently, again, reviewing the constitutionality. Is it constitutional to mandate essentially that ridiculous gerrymanders like this be drawn in Democrats' favor? But there you have it. It is now out of committee, and it's looking like this will be moving forward here very soon. Here is, of course, the picture we've repeatedly tried to show you in terms of, again, despite the accusations that Republicans are the ones who are gerrymandering, when you look, as a matter of fact, just at the very least in the last census, no, it's actually Democrats who have a massive advantage. As a result of this, we're simply balancing those scales here. Of course, with all of that in mind, again, the Texas map is now official. It's moving forward. Gavin Newsom continues to absolutely lose his mind about this in a pretty comical way. So take a listen to him making some empty threats, and then we'll show you in a second what he tried to do to intimidate Republicans. But again, why here, I'm not exactly that scared. But here you go.
How far are you willing to go to stop Trump from stealing the midterms?
What's so interesting about how blue that is, that was done by an independent redistricting commission. That's the difference. We tried to play by a higher value system. It's about formal authority. It's also about moral authority. We tried to do both and. I've supported long supported independent redistricting. I can't stand these gerrymandered districts. I can't stand the fact that we're trying to find, it's, everything about gerrymandering needs to be addressed nationally.
Yep.
And I now realize that as a promoter to do it at the state level, I thought other states would follow suit because it was the right thing to do. They didn't.
No.
And so we've unilaterally disarmed. Democrats can't just sit there and act holier than thou and watch this democracy completely be degraded, watch the rule of law degraded, watch a system of co-equal branches of government completely devastated and rolled back in real time by Trump and Trumpism. So we're going to stand up. That district, likely this state, the blue, will get even darker blue. As we respond to Abbott, we respond to Donald Trump, and we assert ourselves much more aggressively. And that, your prior question, the prior question of that, and this damn question, Democrats need to stop the bullshit. It's a different day. Stop. We're on our heels on everything. They're shape-shifting everything. They're winning the messaging war.
Well, I don't know what Gavin Newsom is referencing in about half of that clip, but thank you for admitting that Republicans are winning. That is, of course, true. But, all of that in mind, Gavin keeps on reverting back to the excuse of, California is not gerrymandered because we use an independent congressional commission. Of course, this is a commission that's been massively criticized and scrutinized. It's obviously heavily influenced by, guess who? The Democrats who run the state. There's even been accusations throughout the years that some of the people they put on the panel and claim were Republicans were not even actually Republicans. And guys, I want to once again here reiterate, that's not exactly surprising to me. I'm not here to make some type of moral stand about gerrymandering. I'm a mature adult. I can understand the reality that, guess what? This is politics. Ultimately, both sides are vying for power and control. You're going to, if you have power in a state, very likely to try to draw congressional maps to some extent within your favor. Both sides do it. We can be mature adults about it. But what I do not appreciate is this total ridiculous moral grandstanding from Democrats acting so holier than thou when, again, they literally, when you look at the last census, have more heavily gerrymandered states than us. And by the way, California can virtue signal all they want because of their independent commission. But guess what? In states like Illinois and Maryland, which we've reacted to the congressional districts there many times, who do not have those and who do indeed do partisan redistricting, guess what has happened as a result of that? Some of the most egregiously gerrymandered states in this country. With all of that in mind, you see here Newsom, his new theme is FAFO, right? Trying to steal a slogan from the right wing saying F around and find out. And of course, you see this massive threat he's been floating that Newsom will move to redraw the California map if Texas redistricts, which would of course tee up a national fight. And he's posting videos like this right here, as you can see.
See, as you can see, the more you fuck around, the more you're going to find out.
Haha, so he's such a tough guy, right? Even just yesterday, he retweeted, as you can see here, this California congressional map that would basically gerrymander so egregiously, even more than it already is, that it would create a 52 Democrat to 0 Republican, map in California. And essentially he's threatening, hey, look, I'm going to do this. Okay, here are just a couple of problems currently with what Newsom is threatening he's going to do. Number one, I'd like to remind people that despite all the talk about gerrymandering, and yes, people can do it and get away with some degree of it, you still also have to have your congressional map stand up in court and against legal scrutiny. So something like this, obviously, despite the threats, even if it was somehow passed in California, likely would not survive in the court because guess what? There still has to be some reasonable deniability about, hey, what you're doing here, is it fair? Does it make any degree of sense? That's kind of point number one. Now, secondly, though, of course, the biggest reason why I so often say Gavin Newsom is completely empty and meaningless on this is because of that very California commission that he keeps on citing. Gavin Newsom, unlike Abbott, despite the threats, cannot just magically call a special legislative session in order to do what he wants, right? He would have to go through the commission. Very likely, as he's talking about, he'd have to do some type of special referendum election in, say, fall of 2025, maybe spring of 2026 in order to abolish the commission and do all this. And to make a very long story short, because all that stuff he set up, or Democrats in the past in that state had set up, are in his way, to make a very long story short, it is unlikely that he will be able to get anything done before 2026 in terms of actually changing California's map. That's why I'm not not scared. And again, I say, even if he does manage to get it all done, okay, the map still has to stand up to legal scrutiny. The Texas one absolutely can, because when you look at Texas's 33rd district, for instance, it's utterly ridiculous. Can California's gerrymander stand up? Well, we'll have to see. So anyways, there you have it. Just more meltdown, more empty threats from Newsom. That said, I want to bring you here now the news out of the Supreme Court, because this, guys, would be a game changer. This is something that would make, even if Newsom was successful, utterly helpless and feckless and useless to do anything. And that is because the Supreme Court is currently considering a case that would ban race-based congressional districting maps, which would, of course, yes, nationally speaking, implode the Democrat Party's ability to win control via racial gerrymandering. And if you're curious what exactly this means, so this is in reference to the original Voting Rights Act of the 1960s, and there's essentially a statute that's been applied ever since then that states that if your state has a enough portion of, say, a Black or Hispanic population, not that you should or you're encouraged, you're required by law to draw out what's called a majority minority district, right? So if you're a state in the South, for instance, right, that obviously, you know, most highest Black population states are in the South, you're required to draw out a Black district. Now, of course, this has always been a hot button debate because, again, the requirement, the quota that you literally have to do it. By the way, if original civil rights law back in the 1960s was designed to avoid racial discrimination, right, outlaw racial discrimination, how is it simultaneously okay to mandate a state to draw a map that's based on racial discrimination, right? And of course, this standard is never applied in the reverse. You look, for instance, at the congressional maps out of a state like New Mexico, where you have 3 seats, I believe. They're all Democrat seats there. How come they're the white minority in the state does not get their own seat? Because, of course, it's never applied evenly. It's literally just applied here to essentially only apply to Black and Hispanic districts. And at the core of what's going on there is it's giving the Democrats a massive electoral advantage because of this type of stuff. Let's break it down what we mean. So for instance, right, when you look at what's happening in Texas, the big debate here was about removing districts like this. As you can see, this is the Texas 33rd Congressional District, and it's obviously a massive gerrymander. Now, of course, and this, by the way, is the current map in Texas that they're looking to change. Now, obviously, you know, you can just look at it. You can see obviously what's going on there, but it's worth noting here, this is not a case of Republicans gerrymandering in their own favor. This is a case where the very outdated, in my opinion, at the very least outdated, Voting Rights Act statute mandated that this majority minority district be drawn. And as you can see, it's pure gerrymandering. It makes absolutely no sense, but this is something that is, of course, a Democrat seat and is required currently by law, or at least that's what they're saying to deal with. That's why Texas is currently in this legal fight, redistricting, all that stuff. You, for instance, also look at a state like Alabama that has 2 Democrat seats, and you might be saying Alabama is such a, you know, deep red place. It's in the deep South. How are they getting 2 Democrat states? But that's precisely because of this Black majority district requirement, right? You actually had the situation back in about 2023 where federal judges mandated that there be the creation of a second. There was already one. They made a second Black majority district as a result of this. And again, like, what's going on here, right? It's a gerrymander. It's a gerrymander in Democrat favor because obviously the Black districts are overwhelmingly Democrat states. And so that's a case where, because of, again, this outdated, ridiculous, and frankly, I would argue discriminatory civil rights law, you're just required, all these Republican states, especially in the South where you have the highest Black populations per capita, right, are required to just hand over an automatic advantage to Democrats. And what are they now saying? They're saying we might be doing away with that. Needless to say, you're talking about something here that if it ends up happening, and I don't know, I'm not saying I necessarily trust the Supreme Court to do, but if they make the right call here, could literally result in the elimination of dozens of Democrat seats nationwide, which would very likely, barring some type of huge blue wave, make it impossible, frankly, for them to ever win power here because, yeah, guess what? As it turns out, as I keep saying, Democrats can actually not win without gerrymandering. So that is essentially the situation here. Again, Texas moving forward, other states looking to do it. But if that Supreme Court case, which we'll see, I'm not making any promises, but if that comes through, massive game changer. With all of that, you have Gavin Newsom continuing to fume here. Earlier this week, he got into a war of words with J.D. Vance over the Congressional Redistricting after Vance called out the fact that, hey, California is a heavily gerrymandered state, as we keep on saying. What the heck are you talking about? And here was Newsom's kind of hilarious and pathetic response. Let's take a listen.
But this guy right here, who
and there's this guy
who called J.D. Vance, who said that your redistricting effort, responding to Donald Trump, was outrageous. Now, J.D. Vance to me is the prime example as the heir apparent to the MAGA movement in 2028.
Pay attention to that.
As the guy, we talk a lot in our party right now about rebranding, but I think in this moment we also have to focus on the brand of the Republican Party. How do we take that guy and reframe how people view the conservative movement? Not as like, oh, we want lower taxes, but these people don't give a shit about you.
J.D. Vance is a unique one because he's complete. He's weakness masquerading as strength.
Yep.
There's nothing authentic about this guy. He's been on every side of every issue. He was one of the leading voices of opposition against Donald Trump. And he was pretty effective about it. He figured this guy out early on. And then he completely sold his soul. He put a mask on and his face has grown into it.
That face.
That's where you went. So that's where I went. And that will be the face of the Republican Party if we don't wake up.
So as usual, Newsom just always projects about everything. And he's pretty good at it. Don't get me wrong. Total sociopath. He can get away with it. But, Newsom, I can think of someone else who has been on the opposite side of every single issue. His name is Gavin Newsom, right? He supports COVID lockdowns, but he dines at French Laundry, right? He supports liberalism of environmental safety and standing up to big business and all this stuff, and then bails out PG&E after they caused the greatest wildfire in U.S. history because of the fact that they gave you campaign donations, right? I can think of a guy who, for instance, spent many years being woke in all this, obviously California, you know how it goes there, and then comes out suddenly and says, I think that men playing women's sports is indeed an issue of fairness, and then 2 months later reverse and then go back to it and try to sue the Trump administration over that very policy. I can think of a guy who governed as the most far-left radical governor in the country, of course, a state that's become basically this anarchist nightmare, and then suddenly now pivoting because he's running for president against J.D. Vance, very likely in the year 2025, and suddenly now framing himself as some type of sensible, common sense moderate. Like, I can think of where that comes from, but, anyways, there you have it. Newsom obviously using this situation and many others to launch his 2028 campaign. You got to admit as well that in comparison to the other Democrats, he is really soaking up the spotlight right now. He's doing the interviews and all that. So, objectively, we know it's coming. Okay. So let's prepare, because I think this is likely going to be the guy we're running against in 2028, barring anything crazy. But essentially here, guys, there you have it. So with all of that said, guys, let me know your thoughts on this in the comment section down below. What do you think of the California empty threats? What do you think of this potential civil rights lawsuit reaching the Supreme Court in terms of, hey, why are southern states almost exclusively required to give away free seats to Democrats when Democrat states are allowed to gerrymander all they want? Let me know. Be sure to leave a like on this video, guys. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. And until next time, God bless and peace.